Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chamber of Commerce webinar. Today, we're going to talk about returning to public buildings amidst COVID-19. I'm Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome you to this webinar. This is part of our program, the BuildSF program, with sponsors HOK, Gensler, Hathaway Dinwiddie, and SOM. These webinars are about infrastructure in San Francisco, construction in San Francisco, building in construction in San Francisco. And we try to get deep into what really the future and existing projects are going on in the city. Today we have a very interesting webinar planned for you and some great speakers, starting with Kathleen Webb, Chief Deputy Director of the California Department of Motor Vehicles, Charles Higueras, who's the Acting Director of Public Projects in San Francisco with the San Francisco Public Works, and Jeff Goodale, Senior Principal and Director of Justice with HOK Architects, along with Julia Payne Cooper, who's the Principal Regional Director Consulting with HOK. We're going to talk about buildings and how they are going to be redesigned, the new social contract amongst the customer, the employee, the employer, and how going forward, the new normal will shape public spaces, public buildings, transit, right-of-way spaces. So we're looking forward to that. Just a little bit of personal note from the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce. You know, COVID-19 has been very difficult for all of us. However, these are design challenges that are right in front of us. And people like the speakers we have today have a great opportunity, an opportunity to change the city, change the world, and how we use it. And so folding in sustainability, folding in best practices, there's a great opportunity and a catalyst for change right now. So with that, Jeff, please take it away. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Rodney. Bear with me 1 second. And I will have this, have it into full screen mode. Here we go. So, hey, thanks so much. And so as Rodney pointed out, you know, we this group really is, you know, specializes in public buildings, and you know, the pandemic has really visited a very interesting and sort of special, you know, issue, because a lot of the things that happen in these facilities are still need to happen. These are still, you know, these are still subjects, and these are still services that the public need, and they can't just shut down. These are essential issues. So, you know, we have this responsibility to make sure people feel at ease when they visit the government facilities, and by addressing the health, safety, and well-being of all occupants, all stakeholders, no matter who those would be. And Rodney, you mentioned Kathleen's, you know, experience with the receivership, and I was as well. I spent a number of years in the receivership and learned a great deal about dealing with communicable disease and that type of thing there. So I brought some of that here as well. At the same time, COVID-19 pandemic has required us to think differently about the physical environment. In some cases, it can be seen as a catalyst for change and innovation. And I think that's where we're all thinking right now. In today's discussion, we are going to talk about the public facilities and facilities that deal with large crowds. We're going to talk about using today's and the near future facilities. We're not smart enough to talk about facilities way out in the future, because I don't know that we have enough data to know how that's going to go, but we've got a few inklings. One of the things where HOK, you know, has a specialty is we deal with facilities with large crowds. You see the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, you know, and that's pre-COVID shot you see there. Airports, we have work at SFO right now, plus we're doing the new LaGuardia Airport. This is a picture of the new LaGuardia. We do healthcare facilities, and obviously, especially when it comes to waiting rooms and, you know, in emergency rooms, that type of thing, incredibly important how we deal with crowds. So it's a specialty of ours, and it's something obviously we have a great deal of interest in the future of that as well. So as we get to that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to talk a little bit about the current state in San Francisco.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. We've been living with COVID for 5 months. Hard to imagine, but it's 5 months, and it's many more months to come, of course. But we can take some solace, I think, in knowing that San Francisco is distinguished nationally for addressing COVID as soon as we did. Our local world, of course, changed on March 6th when the city's health officer declared a public health emergency. This declaration brought to our attention, of course, what we needed to do to remain safe as individuals and as a community. The health department's webpage, which is illustrated on this image here, provides a truly comprehensive array of guidelines for both public and private enterprises to seek safety while remaining as functional as practicable. It really is incumbent on every one of us to weigh the risks of all our actions. Next slide, please. So, weighing the risk. It's science-based, and as we all would hopefully agree, it's extremely doable. While some unfortunately may see it as an infringement on personal liberties, it really is simply about each of us doing our part for the greater good. Some of these elements or aspects of weighing the risk are very apparent to us, but it's important that we have sort of a similar thought or thinking about how we weigh the risk so that we can all engage the threat of the disease in the most effective way. Jeff will be elaborating on some of the ways this is accomplished in some of HOK's projects that he'll be illustrating. Next slide, please. So, despite the quickness in San Francisco in responding to COVID, we certainly have not overcome it. This image here indicates the hospitalizations over the time frame noted there. This is about 3 weeks old at this point. But what we do know is that while we had great success as we approached the summer, June, we spiked because we let our guard down effectively. And when you let your guard down, you don't wear the mask, you don't social distance, our cases will spike. Still low compared to other major urban centers, of course, but we can't really take any solace in knowing that we have to drive these numbers down yet again more. It's disproportionately affecting people of color in our community, especially among Latino and Asian folks. And so it's important that we all do what we can to protect the entirety of our community. We have to resolve to follow all the guidelines that have been issued. So we should become very familiar with them. I think we probably intuitively understand what we need to do, but we really should look at what we are being asked to do. This is the only way, frankly, for us to return to the social and the economic vitality of pre-COVID times. One area of our local economy pertains to the capital projects that the city sponsors on behalf of a variety of city departments to address our public infrastructure needs. For example, Public Works awarded construction contracts benefiting an array of city departments worth about $1.1 billion from July 2017 to March 20. The city has passed more general obligation bonds for infrastructure in the last 15 years than in the previous 40. So the commitment to our infrastructure is real. Our 10-year capital plan update, inclusive of general obligation bond and the city's general fund, two different sources, pre-COVID defined an expectation of $39 billion over the next 10 years. The city, quite frankly, is the largest developer of projects in San Francisco. And when circumstances emerge, then in 2008, the impact to our best laid plans for capital improvement can be considerable. Next slide, please. So, COVID's impact on addressing our infrastructure needs, while not disabling, and I want to paint a too gloomy picture here, is still very real. While GO bond funds are not fungible, general funds work is vulnerable to this current city's budget distress. The next 2 years will see a decrease of approximately 68% in general fund investment in infrastructure projects. Unsurprisingly, this does put a stress on deferred maintenance backlog and makes difficult, frankly, the ability to address the unforeseen and unfunded conditions that always emerge. In addition, as we know, there will be some project delays. For example, the port's Mission Bay Ferry landing and as well the SFO Terminal 3 West project. When and how these affected projects return, and others like them, will rely on how COVID is overcome. And that goes back to my earlier suggestion that we can all help to make that happen sooner than later. Next, please. Thank you. Even with all the restrictions, of course, there are aspects of city service and life that can be realized carefully and with creativity. Dolores Park, we all know, is a very tangible example of this. We can avail ourselves of public venues if we do so very, very mindfully. City's Golden Gate Park is another very large and wonderful place to enjoy the outdoors. Parenthetically, I urge you to visit the botanical gardens in the park. It is truly one of the city's jewels. The city has just launched the Shared Spaces program that will let restaurants and retail expand into outdoor spaces. And the San Francisco Public Library will begin, after many months of closure, to offer curbside service for the loaning of books and material, beginning with the main library. Next slide, please. And getting back to capital projects then, most of you know that the city is consolidating many departments into a new office building at 49 South Van Ness. Most significantly, the planning, public works, and building inspection departments. This slide here, image shows the rendering of the building, of course, a rendering of an interior space that pertains to what I'll be talking about next, the permit center, and the layout actually of the permit center at the second floor of the building. Next slide, please. So the one aspect of this new building that will have the greatest resonance for the public is this permit center. Before now, there were 13 different locations in the city for seeking a permit. This will now be possible. This will all now be possible at 49 South Van Ness within a single floor plate. Once we're able to reopen post-COVID circumstances permitting. In the meantime, we are providing limited in-person services by appointment on the first and second floors of the new building. And we're seeking to move as many permits and services online as is possible. 49 South Van Ness is but one example of how local government is seeking to continue its transactional business relationships with the public in the safest and most effective way. And this is something that we're continuously examining and revisiting and hoping to daylight more prominently so that folks don't have too much complaint, frankly, about how the city is rising to the challenge of responding to the needs of the public. So with that, I'd like to turn it next over to Jeff to illustrate some of these aspects of how to operate functionally and safely within public spaces.
Thanks, Charles. So, you know, I mentioned before, the buildings that deal with crowds and courthouses, and you see one here that we're developing in the Midwest in Indianapolis right now, are one of the biggest, biggest users, and we get a large influx starting at 7:30 in the morning every day, and can handle 500, 600 people that suddenly come into the facility, and that really creates a big challenge for these facilities. Even in pre-COVID they did, but now even especially so. So what are some of the strategies we're looking at? Well, one of the things that we're doing is really trying to open up these areas even more, having larger areas. And in this particular case, we're already looking ahead at driverless cars and having more of a drop-off that you might see more at an airport or at a hotel, and then opening up that lobby area to really, again, create more space. Some of the things that we deal with once we're inside the building, the lobby itself, the processing of the visitors in, waiting areas inside, and then looking at technology alternatives that can also help with these situations. One of the case study I'll use right here is also one we're developing in Detroit right now. It's a $500 million rework of the entire justice system for Wayne County, where Detroit's located in Michigan. And what you see here is a criminal court, which is sort of the centerpiece of this facility. And the glassed-in area at the bottom is the lobby where all visitors will come in. They'll come into one central point, whether they're visiting the court or whether they're going to the sheriff's department, or what other functions are at this particular campus. One of the keys here is flexibility, and you see three different versions of a lobby. And the one on the far left is more pre-COVID, where we process a lot of visitors through kind of a standard type of line. The one in the middle, we start to break that line down more, and the one on the right, we spend more space at the very beginning being able to do pre-check. So there's a lot by having a larger lobby, by having larger areas to process folks, we're able to actually provide more flexibility for our clients to be able to handle this lobby in a variety of different ways. The screening equipment that we're all used to is going to look maybe different as well. This is, as well as security checks, this is also health screening checks too, the kind of devices. Now we're incorporating that technology right now into more facilities, but it will just be one more element in being able to keep people safe, coming and using the facility when they come in. Next one I'm going to show is just courtrooms. Traditionally in courtrooms, we've used pews, to sit as many people in a court as possible. And here you can see, we're now using individual seats. So rather than the pews, we have the ability to use individual seating. It will cut down how many people can be in court to observe, the proceedings. And so scheduling and staggering scheduling would be another factor in court use. I think the last thing, and very importantly, is really the improvement of technology in terms of video and audio, and being able to use that to actually not have people come to the court. And one of our clients, the Indianapolis client, has now had a full trial with Zoom, very successful. And so, things like jury selection, those types of things that a lot of people here on this call have been part of, those things, can happen now more with video, and they can stand up to challenges, which has been a problem in the past. So that's just one example of how courts can be dealt with. And Kathleen and Julie are going to talk more about, other facilities.
Unmute.
Unmute you.
Unmuted. We're muting and unmuting each other. We're playing a bit of ping pong here. So here we go.
I can hear you, Julia.
Okay, good. Now.
I can hear you just fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So here's where we want to just start to shift a little bit, to start to think about how maybe this pandemic could be a catalyst for change. We've got our clients thinking both short-term and long-term about the meaning of their physical spaces, whether that's office space or public gathering space. We know that many people are realizing that working from home largely works, not for everyone and not all the time, but for many, they're realizing that it works better than they thought it could. And some clients, like the DMV, are transitioning to an increased number of digital modes of interface with the public, which would decrease the amount of time that people would need to come into a physical space. But there's still many reasons why people need to come together, and they need a place to do that. So one of the big questions becomes, what is the essential role of a government facility in going forward from this? We're now thinking about this answer from at least these 4 perspectives. So the facility is a place for the community to come together, a place to engage in idea exchange and to share knowledge formally and informally, and a place where services are delivered, and in particular where people find the additional assistance they need when online isn't possible or they need more assistance. And a perfect example of this is the California Department of Motor Vehicle project. So on the next slide, we start to talk about that project. Me and Kathleen will get into more detail about this, but as an intro, HOK was initially hired to define a design concept for the future of the DMV field office that considered retail analytics and line management, workflow efficiency, and customer experience. But during the project, COVID-19 hit, and the project became one in which the DMV sought to kind of increase and pivot towards integrating customer-centric technology and accelerate a path that they were already on. So this is where that kind of innovative thinking about the future and a catalyst for change comes in. So that customer-centric technology to optimize the customer and the employee interactions to a higher degree. And so this shift then became more of a focus on personalizing that customer experience according to the customer's needs, abilities, and preferences, and improving the clarity and choice for people, increasing processing efficiency, and also there's an opportunity to champion sustainability. So now HOK's new deliverable is to define the amount of space that's required to service customers that need that kind of face-to-face, and I'm doing air quotes on purpose, an in-person interaction, because there's many different ways that we can interpret how that happens. And that's what we're working with the DMV now, so that we can define what those interactions are based on necessity and choice, where people need to actually be in some kind of a facility or some kind of a physical environment. And with that, Kathleen will tell us a little bit more specifically about the project.
Great, thank you, Julia. Very happy to be with all of you. So for those of you following the news around the DMV, there's been several catalysts for change for the DMV, not only COVID, but in 2019, myself and Director Gordon really were tasked with modernizing the DMV under the governor's charge. And we've been engaged with doing that, whether it's our technology systems or our service delivery model. We also really wanted to address what I call the reimagination of our DMV field offices. Now, at the onset of the pandemic, we really did strive to keep our offices open. But we found as of March 27th that we just couldn't do that. And we needed to actually close the offices down. And the illustration you see here shows the 190 public offices that we had to close down in the state of California in response to COVID. Now, I will also clarify that this picture of a typical DMV office is clearly in a closed state pre-COVID-19, because you'll see how close the chairs all are. If you go to a DMV office today, you'll see there's quite a bit of social distancing that we've exercised there. Now, you know, the other thing that Charles brought up, and I want to kind of tap into that as well. The DMV does have a 5-year infrastructure plan, like most organizations. And similar to what San Francisco is facing is the capital outlay challenges we're going to have, and managing the deferred maintenance with some of the budget challenges we're all facing. So that's going to be a challenge, but also really because of that, it drives us to rethink and reimagine again that space that we're currently occupying, our footprint. You know, I think the thing that COVID allowed us to actually leverage even more is we were already expanding our online services. And with the onset of COVID, we actually started adding more transactions to our online presence, but we also created, alluding to what Julia was talking about, a virtual field office capability. Because some of our online transactions don't really allow for the uploading and exchange of documents. And so by creating the virtual field office, and one of the first transactions we addressed was title transfer, we were able to allow our customers to upload documents to be able to process title transactions. Because believe me, even in COVID-19, that activity was still going on, people buying and selling cars. So we were able to do that. And then on May 8th, we actually started moving forward the phased reopening of our offices. We addressed all of the what I call social distancing requirements, the health protocols we needed to put in place, ensuring an appropriate supply chain for our PPEs that we would need to keep on hand. And that was critical for us to put that in place, and certainly in negotiation discussion with our union partners. And so if we could go to the next slide. You know, as Julia shared, kind of pre-COVID, we were really thinking about how do you measure the business process flow around licensing and registration activity, and how can we improve the back office flow? So it was really still thinking we would have a footprint, but how do we improve that footprint and create better customer experiences and a better flow? With COVID, we really stepped back and thought about how do we start really nudging our customers towards, you know, leveraging our digital footprint. And so, you know, the challenge we have, and where this slide actually is really interesting, is really looking and better understanding our customers and their digital fluency. What's keeping people from going to a digital first solution? And how can that help us move forward with where we want to go in a digital first capacity? So if you go to the next slide, one of the things that, as Julia alluded to, was really understanding by region, in this case, you know, by all of our counties that we have a presence in, is understanding the service channels that are being used. And we're monitoring this on a regular basis, because as you can imagine, it's fluctuating. But since COVID, which has really been fascinating, we've seen about a 30%, in some cases a 50% increase in the uptake of the internet transaction capability. So it's been fascinating to see that. And then we've also seen a number of customers adopt our virtual field office capabilities. So again, all these folks are actually being moved out of our field offices and into these digital platforms to serve them. We're also increasing the capacity of our call centers to actually handle transactions, while also ensuring appropriate privacy protection as they share any kind of credit card information as they make payments. So again, all these channels are starting to absorb what I would call things that were coming in through our field offices. So now, as Julie was talking about, we're really taking a look at each of our counties. And the conversation we had even yesterday with our HOK partners is, you know, I look at Trinity County, you don't see as high adoption rate for digital services. We know we probably will have to have a presence there. We also know that the greater percentage of that community is in your kind of traditionalist baby boomer. And there's not a lot of what I call accessible web services for them. Those are our broadband challenges we have. But then if you look at Santa Clara County, very different story there. How can we better leverage and nudge our customers to be larger consumers of our digital footprint? So it's really going to be a fascinating discussion, but what I love about where we're going is really thinking strategically about preferred channels of service, and then what does that mean for the DMV as we go forward, and whether we can have a physical presence or we can primarily serve that community through our digital presence. So on next slide, this really gets into the work that we're doing around the personas and collecting that information. At this point in time, and that's what our meeting about was yesterday, is really looking at the state's demographics, breaking it down by counties, understanding the community and those that live in that community, and how can we better serve them, what it might mean for marketing to help encourage people to move towards a digital solution. And then again, be specific about what does the future DMV office look like. So if I'm in Merced County, what does that look to serve a population that where English is maybe spoken by 50% as a preferred language? What does it mean when folks are more cash paying customers? And so these are all things we're really diving in to better understand to how to serve our customers. I think the piece that I'm most excited about is we've engaged our other sister departments here at the state of California and exploring the concept, and you'll see that down below, is kind of a one-stop shop for services. And the state of California has never done that. We know it's been done in other areas. Canada in some other provinces has done this. Some states are starting to explore it. But could we bring, like departments, maybe it's the Franchise Tax Board, it's the Department of Tax and Fee Administration, could be some of our Department of Consumer Affairs organizations for professional licensing. So is there a way to bring those into maybe a one-stop shop where if we have owned buildings, can we actually use that in a more efficient way by also having other servicing departments for the community join us? So really excited about where that's going. We recently, through the help of HOK, did a survey with some of our departments to explore who might be interested and join us in that effort. And more importantly, the Department of General Services is a partner with us on that, who has primary oversight for our facilities in the state of California. So next slide. I'm fairly new to the DMV, and I learned every day I'm here. I joined them in early 2019 as part of the strike team effort, and sometimes feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose, but it's getting better. It doesn't feel like a fire hose every day anymore. But one of the things I really find interesting, and sometimes people fail to remember, is DMV was founded in 1915. It really does have a rich history. And I look at some of the old history photographs, we were licensing buggies and bicycles when we first started. And where we are today, contemplating autonomous vehicles. It's really fascinating where the DMV gets involved. But I will also tell you, typical of kind of government operations, it was really operating what I call a 1970s delivery model. And we are making progress and we are changing that. And I really appreciate kind of the work we're doing with HOK and all this reimagining of how we better serve our customers, both in a digital footprint, but also in our field operations. So we could not do this at DMV without the partnership with HOK. So I continuously thank Julia for all of her support. And I just thank you for giving an opportunity to share kind of our journey here at DMV.
Okay, so these we can see here are some additional resources that, and you'll have the opportunity to be able to tap into these to get additional information, on this subject. This group is really excited to talk about this. It's an important topic. And hopefully we've given you just a few highlights here, about what it's meaning to your city right now, a few strategies and how to deal with these facilities, because I think on a bigger picture, the role of buildings and the role of how we serve the public, serve clients is something that's always at the forefront of our minds on improving things. And COVID has just added one more really important challenge to all that, and made us really, think very hard about how these, facilities are going to work in the future. So with that, Rodney, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most fascinating and encouraging webinars we've done. It's great to know that many of your organizations have been hard at work for many years, sort of setting up for these infrastructure changes. And as we're all watching the economy change, it's quite obvious that we are going to need to put emphasis on infrastructure projects, put emphasis on job creation. And I love Julia's catalyst for change. Maybe many of us who've been in the green space, sustainability space, for waiting for sort of a moment like this to implement. What I also think is interesting in just being an observer of all of your expertise is that you're all really thinking about the customer experience and the customer relationship. We are all going to have a sort of a different social contract with each other, from employer to employee and from customer to employee. And so all of those interactions obviously are all being thought of, which is fantastic. Wanted to open it up to any questions that we have. We have over 40 people on this call, which is fantastic. And if there are any questions, you can put them in the chat. But I maybe just throw it out. And if there's any thought to job creation, San Francisco is at 153,000 unemployment claims, many of them from the hospitality community. How do we fire up these projects? And I realize that funding is another bigger question, but how do we jumpstart some of them, especially the ones that maybe can create new jobs, new employment? And in precursor to that, if we know what those might be, the Chamber of Commerce is spending a lot of time in the workforce development arena, talking about how are we going to reskill, retrain many hardworking people, smart people who want to go back to work, but it's going to require a certification or a quick upskilling for them. But just give it your thoughts with the tie-in just randomly to the panel about employment and job creation.
Charles,
well, from the perspective of capital projects, I might throw in here that construction jobs create jobs not only among our local residents, but beyond. There's a whole supply network that provides materials, equipment, and such for construction projects. So that all brings up the local economy and the broader economy as well. Certainly having more people, construction workers, if you will, on the street, coming into the city, availing themselves of available retail, whether for food or for other items, is very important. So we believe that the capital work that the city undertakes has its benefits beyond the actual particular thing that's being replaced or installed. That provides for the flow, if you will, of cash throughout the local businesses, and I think it's all to the good.
Absolutely. And at the DMV, obviously there's some employment in revamping some of the locations. Maybe it changing virtually, maybe changes to something a little bit different. The work from home is another piece. And so you may not see the same number of employees in one spot, but they certainly could be all over the state and processing DMV customers.
Yeah, Rodney, that's a great comment and a great question. So, the upskilling is something I've always been a big advocate for from a job development standpoint. And, as the DMV, the governor sees this, and he's absolutely right. We're kind of the largest retail arm for state government when you think about what we do in our presence for the state of California. And we have been very transactionally based, and our employees really are principally transactionists. But at this point in time, when we can actually use technology to handle so much of the transactions, what does that mean for kind of my workforce and the skills they need? Are we moving them to more analytical types of jobs? The thing you brought up, and I think is absolutely right, we're also exploring telework capability, obviously when we need people to stay home, and particularly with some of their health conditions, finding ways to be a better telework organization. The example I would give you, prior to COVID, so we're about 9,500 employees at the DMV. Prior to COVID, we had 20 people, 20 teleworking. With COVID, we moved to over 2,000 people teleworking. Wow. So again, an amazing change in a very short period of time, and kind of new and novel for the DMV. And how do you manage a telework environment as well? And so we're still working through all of that. But to your point, when I think about the call center operation, that could be done from a telework standpoint, meaning my ability to reach out to an employee base I haven't been able to, it changes. People who typically maybe don't work for the state of California living in some more rural county might be able to actually work for the state of California and have a state job. The location of my call centers, I could think about where would be a good place to put those call centers that also are better equipped to handle the salaries that we pay at the state and from a cost of living standpoint. So the flexibility that it gives us as a state is really kind of interesting, and we're having some good conversations about all of that as we think about the future of the DMV and how we operate and where we operate.
Yeah. Thank you, Kathleen. Very, very exciting times and great for those updates.
One more thing I would just add, and I thank you for bringing up the change management practitioner early in the introduction, is that all of these things, people are going through a tremendous amount of change, and whether it's within a workplace, whether there's people working in different ways from home, and who knows how many will come back, because it's anticipated that there is a degree that will continue to work from home to some degree. But there's also our customers, clients, there's passengers in terms of traveling through airports, let's say, and coming to sports venues, with all these types of buildings that we and venues that we work with. They all are for people, and people need to be able to get help in managing through that transition. So remembering to bring people through and having a plan and managing that change, helping them to manage that change is important to think about along the way. It is in many ways a fire hose, as you mentioned. That's such a great example when you feel like that it's just so much happening at once, but at a certain point in time, getting your hands around it and helping people go through that, and that education and training that you mentioned before, not just the upskilling, but just that training when it comes from a point of doing things differently is important to think about.
Julia, thanks for bringing that up. And, change is difficult for so many people, and for all of us, even those who think about the future and plan the future, we're in the midst of change. But I agree with you, if there is a roadmap, if there is a pathway, a game plan, it makes it so much easier for people to see tomorrow when they're able to look down the road to next year or the year after. So we're at the Chamber strong advocates of trying to lay out that roadmap. This has been a fascinating conversation. I honestly hope that I continue conversations with each one of you going forward and tracking and helping where we can at the Chamber. HOK has been a great board member and participant of the Chamber of Commerce, so I want to thank HOK for bringing this presentation to us. This is part of our BuildSF committee, and we do multiple events around infrastructure, around construction, around trades, and this is just one more of them. If I could kind of wrap this up, and I want to thank everybody for joining. The San Francisco Chamber of Commerce has been around for 170 years. This is actually our 170th anniversary, and we are a nonprofit, kind of like KQED and NPR. So it's membership driven, membership supported. So whenever you can, please contribute, please sign up for different things and participate. One unrelated thing, but an interesting one, is we talk about how we're changing customer service. The Chamber has just launched something called its Small Business Desk, Help Desk. And once a week on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock, there's going to be an online live person, Amelia Lindy, who will be there to help small businesses with advice, tips, tricks, consult with them, with other small businesses. But again, an opportunity for us to go virtual and reach out and maybe hopefully be even more impactful than we were live and in person. So want to thank everybody for joining. Panelists, you are fantastic. Looking forward to another round 2 of this, and probably just a lot will happen in a couple of months. Charles, any parting thoughts?
No, thank you for the great opportunity here. I think it's very important to maintain a very optimistic perspective, because San Francisco has been through a great deal over its history. We talk often of the city burned down several times before 1906, and we always came back with a strong resolve to overcome and to be better. And I think that this is another opportunity for us to demonstrate that, not just to ourselves, but to the world beyond.
Charles, I love it. This is nothing but opportunity knocking on our door. The future is somewhat out of our control, but we do have our hands on the steering wheel, and we have an opportunity to steer where San Francisco wants to go. So I love your comment and totally support that feeling and that emotion. That opportunity is right in front of us.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other closing thoughts?
Just actually following on to what Charles said, this is there's so much doom and gloom about this pandemic, but to really shift our thinking towards these opportunities, this catalyst, this new way of doing things, now is the time. Really start thinking about how we can make these changes. There's a lot of change that's been brewing behind the scenes in people's minds. Push it forward now. That's what I would like to see people doing in a very strategic way, of course, but think about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I learned a lot, and hopefully everyone here who signed on learned a lot as well. And we'll be back to you with more information.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.